Hey guys, it's Pelican here and welcome to my Magsorc solo PvP build for the Deadlands patch. I haven't been playing ESO much lately, but I've made a Magsorc build for this patch and tested it out in open world 1vx as well as duels. And so far I found it to be much tankier than expected, and it's also capable of applying some serious pressure, not to mention it has a lot of sustain. Timestamps are in the description, and without further ado, let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be going through my gear setup first, running 2-piece Magma Incarnate, 1-piece Trainee, 5-piece Elfic, 3-piece Ancient Grace, and 1 Death Dealer's Feat for my Mythic. Elfic and Ancient Grace are pretty self-explanatory, they are all just Max Magicka. You just want to stack as much Max Magicka on Magsorc as possible because it is the only stat that benefits your shield size, which is our main defense. For my monster, I'm running Magma Incarnate. The main reason I'm running Magma Incarnate is just because it's the most solid monster set for really any solo player cast, except maybe Dragon Knight where Bloodspawn is better. Has a very stat dense 1-piece bonus, gives you both mag and stand recovery. And although the second bonus doesn't benefit Magsorc directly as a class, it does give resistance and spell damage, which is always helpful. Just a overall very stat dense monster set that I highly recommend. Alternatively, you can also run Bloodspawn, still a very good monster, or you can also go the classic Domihius plus Swarm Mother for stam and mag. For Trainee, I'm just running this to make up for the extra slot that I have. It gives me some max HP. And for my Mythic, I do believe Death Dealer's Feat is the best Mythic for Magsorc. It gives you so much stats, especially Magicka. And alternatively, you can always go Talk of Toner for a lot more sustain, or you can even run Wild Hunt for more mobility. Or if you do not have access to Mythic, you can always swap this out for another Trainee piece so that you get more Max Magicka in return. So moving on, I'll be going through with the traits and enchantments now. Ideally, you would want Reinforce on the chest piece, which is heavy, and ideally I want all well fitted on my other pieces. Right now I have 2 Impen, I just don't have enough Transmute, but Impen isn't like really useful now. Crit damage is so rare, and the survivability that you get from being able to roll more is going to be much better than just having some more pieces of Impen. So yeah, go 6 well fitted is what going 6 well fitted is what I recommend. And for the jewelry, I'm running 1 Triune and 2 Arcane. It doesn't really matter like which is Triune and which is Arcane. You can just adjust it accordingly to suit your preferences for your max stats. Oh, speaking of max stats, I will leave the screenshot of my fully buff stats here so that you can compare it. Keep in mind it's with hardened ward up. But yeah, for my personal setup, I'm running tri-stack glyphs on 2 big pieces and 1 small piece. As I say, it doesn't really matter where you go. Just make sure you have the stat that you're comfortable with. So moving on to the jewelry enchantments, I'm running 2 mag recovery glyphs and 1 tri recovery glyph. It might seem like a lot of sustain considering the fact that I'm also Breton, but I realized that stage 3 vamp is very taxing on my sustain, so that's why I decided to go 2 mag recovery glyphs. You can adjust it accordingly. I just feel like 1 tri recovery glyph is perfect for my stem sustain. Moving on to my front bar, I'm running a charged Infernal Staff. You might be wondering why not sharpen. So I will go into more detail on why I run charged later on when I'm going through the skills. And for my enchantments, I'm running Poison. On my back bar, I'm running a Resto with weapon damage enchantment infused. You can also choose to go defending if you find yourself, staying on your back bar a lot more. And some of you might realize, why am I running Resto if I'm not running Rapid Regen? I just find that Resto out is much more useful than having Temporal Guard. I find myself using it a lot in open world Cyrodiil, But if you're not a fan of resto out, you can always slot temporal guard, and instead of a resto, you can always run sword and board for more max magicka for larger shields. Or you can do what I like to do in the past, which is to run ice staff and take out the trifocus passive. So that's all for the gear setup. Now I'll be moving on to the skills. First, I'll go through my front bar. I have Inner Light, Crystal Frax, Crushing Shock, Haunting Curse, Shriek, and Power Overload. I'll be going through Crushing Shock first because it is the main reason why I'm running the charge trait. As you can see, it hits 3 different times, and each separate damage is a different element. So you're going to be consistently applying all 3 elemental status effects on your enemies. And on top of those 3, you are also applying overcharged from magic damage as well as poison damage. And for example, if you are using Dawnbreaker, you will also be applying Sundered when your ultimate procs. So for the duration of this explanation, I will put the effects of what each status effect does at the top left, so you can refer to it. But why is this so important? Well, it's because when you're applying that much status effects constantly on your enemies, you're going to be applying a lot more additional pressure to them, as well as debuffs. Like for example, you have Burning and Poison, which does damage over time, and you also have Shock damage, which will increase all damage done against the enemy. And on top of that, you have Frost and Overcharged, which maims and applies Magicka Steel respectively to your enemy. And another bonus is the fact that every time you apply, I think in fact most status effects, when you apply them, it does a small bit of damage. Like for example, if you see right here, Overcharge crit for 955 there against this dummy. It is just an additional damage, but keep in mind that this is almost every time you attack, because you're just going to be applying the status effects so often. And that's the whole reason why we are going charged instead of sharpen, and taking the advantage of all the status effects. And another plus side of having so many status is, if you are fighting like a Magpla or a Warden, it is less likely for them to be purging the more vital debuffs like Haunting Curse. They are more likely to end up purging all your status effects instead. And especially in the case of Magplas, if you are spamming Crushing Shock on them non-stop, it's going to be very hard for them to constantly purge away all the debuffs. It's going to cost them a lot of sustain. So that's why I chose to go Crushing Shock instead of Ally Weapon and pair it together with Charged. So moving on to my other skills, I have Inner Light for more max mag as well as Spell Crit to just increase my damage output on the front bar. And you can also use it to reveal Nightblades out of stealth. Crystal Frax is your main burst ability, which is paired together with Haunting Curse. So try to land the burst from Frax together with Haunting Curse to get a massive burst. And Shriek is my main CC ability. You can also use it. It is also used for a lot of mobility. And if you are used to having Ball of Lightning on the back bar, it might take some time getting used to. But overall, having Shriek front bar is really useful because it saves out one spot. I used to run like Clench and Ball of Lightning on my back bar. So now that I have an extra slot, I'm able to slot Inner Light. So it might take some time getting used to, and aiming with it can be quite difficult sometimes. But if I can do it with high ping, then I think it is still a very good skill to use. And lastly, for my ultimate, I don't really have like a set ultimate that I use. There are just so many options for Magsorc. The one I find most solid is Overload, because I find that it is really useful for taking down like tanky players. But here are some other ultimates you can run. I really love to run Storm Atro when fighting a lot of people, because it can be used offensively as well as defensively. You can dance around your Storm Atro, get some line of sight, and make it really hard for your enemies to hit you. You can also run Dawnbreaker. It is quite a strong burst now, Only thing I don't like about it is the cast time, and everyone is a vamp, so it's going to do additional damage. And since we are using Streak, you can even run Ice Comet paired with Streak and it's going to be very hard to counter. So yeah, that's all for my front bar. For my back bar, I have Dark Conversion, Boundless Storm, Dampen Magic, Hardened Ward, Crit Surge, and Life Giver. Dark Conversion is a very nice sustain skill to have. Gives you mag instantly and overtime. As much as possible, I would try to keep the overtime effect up. And it's also a very nice little burst heal. And if you notice, we don't really have any heals beside Crit Surge. So this can function as sort of a secondary heal. Although I wouldn't cast it while in the open and under fire, what I usually like to do is to streak around an obstacle and cast 1 or 2 Dark Conversions. Next up is Boundless Storm. This will give you a major resolve, but it also gives you a short burst of speed. So it's really nice to use in conjunction with Streak to get away from tough situations. And the damage over time is also very useful in helping proc your Crit Surge. So it's going to be constantly dishing out damage. Some of it will crit and proc your healing. Next up is Dampen Magic. This is your secondary shield. Your main shield is Hardened Ward. When you're casting shields, always cast Harden first, followed by Dampen. Hardened Ward is stronger and costs less. And if you're not a fan of having 2 shields, you can always run Rapid Regen, which is the other morph of this skill, over Dampen Magic. And finally, we have Crit Surge. As mentioned before, this is your main form of healing, but it also gives you spell damage. And it lasts for quite long, so you shouldn't really be having much trouble keeping this up. And finally, for my ultimate, I have Life Giver. And the reason why I use this morph over the other is because I feel like Major Force isn't really as strong now, with the general decrease of crit chance in the game. So I would much rather have the out cast an additional 3 skills. Now I'll be going through why I chose each skill. Healing Ward is pretty self-explanatory. The other morph is useless. And I chose Combat Prayer over the other because I get more damage off of it. But I feel like I don't really need a longer Minor Resolve duration because I already have Minor Resolve from Magma Incarnate. And the reason I use Radiating over Rapid is because I feel like I don't really need more healing when Resto Up is up. I would much rather have 5 seconds of additional healing once the Resto Out expires. So that's why I chose Radiating. And another plus side of this morph over the other is the fact that it gives you a massive burst heal at the start because of Combat Prayer and Healing Ward. And part of the problem of using the other morph of Resto Out is that you can often still die 1 second after you cast it because you're just taking that much damage. And Resto Out alone won't be enough healing. So these 2 burst heals can potentially save you at the start of the cast. So that's all for the back bar. Now I'll be going through the rest of the stuff. For my attributes, I'm running all into max mag. I'm running the Mage for my mundus and Bewitched Sugar Skulls for my food. I'm also a stage 3 vamp. Some people might be afraid of going vamp because of the sustain issues, but that's why I'm running so much mag recovery. And trust me, the Undeath passive is really worth it. It makes you so much tankier, especially at low HP. And in fact, most of the time I like to sit at low health just warding because it gives me so much additional resistance. And I actually survive better at low HP than high HP because I'm just taking so much less damage. So really strong passive, and highly recommend going vamp on Magsorc as well as really any other class. Even though you take more flame damage and mag DKs are very common and one of the main counters to Magsorc, still think it's very worth it to go vamp. And other than that, for my race, I'm a Breton. I do believe that Breton is better than High Elf now. I always used to use High Elf for my Magsorc, and part of the reason is because of spell attunement. Like with the buff to charge now, I mean everyone is going to be proccing status effects on you. This is pretty much going to be up 100% of the time. and you also get a lot of cost reduction and mag recovery, which is helpful in mitigating the effects of stage 3 vamp. So that's why I chose to go Breton over high elf. And for my potions, I'm also running tri-stat pots. That's part of the advantage of having crit surge and inner light is the fact that you can run tripods and not worry about your stem sustain. On top of tripods, I also have in-move detection pods. I like to use this when I'm struggling against like Night Blades. So these are the two potions that I use. And yeah, other than that, make sure. Oh yeah, I'm running 5-1-1 for my armor. So 5 light, 1 heavy, and 1 medium to maximize my max stats. And that's pretty much for my setup. Now I'll be going through to the CP. For my blue CP, I have Ironclad, Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, and Duelist rebuff. This is very standard CP setup for any single target focus build. I use the same on my Stem Blade as well. For my red CP, I have Pain's Refuge, Sustained by Suffering, Survival Instincts, and Bastion. Pain's Refuge is probably the best red CP for solo PvPers. You're going to get a lot of mitigation when you're fighting outnumbered thanks to this CP. Sustained by Suffering is basically a better version of Rejuvenation. This is pretty much going to be up all the time, especially if you're fighting outnumbered. Survival Instincts is very nice for additional stem sustain. Like Sustained by Suffering is pretty much going to be up almost all the time, and it's going to be reducing the cost of every ability listed here. So very nice sustain skill to have. Some people will prefer Arcane Alacrity, and it is also very nice if used correctly, but personally I like Survival Instincts as it is much more consistent. Your shields will not be up all the time, so you don't really benefit fully from this CP. Plus the reduction to dodge roll is not very far behind for Survival Instincts compared to Arcane. And finally, we have Bastion. This will increase the size of your shields. Very useful for Magsorc. And it's also very useful if you are fighting other shield users, because it increases your damage done. And for my blue CP, for my green CP, I'm not going to go through much in depth. You can pretty much run any that you wish. Just make sure to have points into Break 4. It's very useful for tower fights. And I also like to have Steed's Blessing so that I can run faster out of combat. But that's all for my CP. So that's all for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As mentioned at the start, I haven't been playing ESO much lately. I've been busy playing other games as well as having real life commitments. So I still wanted to share this build setup with you guys. I know many of you have been waiting for a while for new Magsorc setup, and just so happened that this patch I decided to try out Magsorc and kind of loved it. It was much stronger than I expected. So yeah, I hope you guys will find this setup as fun as I did. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.